This is my new game Rainbow Tycoon, and in the last video you guys saw me building the map, building the Tycoon, adding in the scripts and configuring the game. But after all of that hard work we discovered a problem. And here it is. This is the problem that we must address. The scripts I added in the last video are old and outdated. They haven't been used in months, making them unreliable and more likely to break when we have hundreds of players in the game. On top of that, our output is flooded with errors. Let me explain. When a player doesn't have enough money, we want to prompt them with the Robux store so they can buy more in-game cash. However, in this old Tycoon kit, instead of properly directing them to Robux store, it immediately prompts them with a developer product purchase. While that isn't necessarily a bad approach, it's not the system I want to use, and to make things worse, it's broken. So it simply has to go. To avoid any more unexpected issues down the line, I've decided to scrap this version of the game entirely and use scripts I trust. The ones I've used in my other games, which have generated millions of visits and are proven to be safe and stable. This way I know for sure that nothing will break even with hundreds of players in the game. With that said, let's start adding the new Tycoon system. I began by swapping out all of the old models, scripts and configurations and replacing them with the ones we'll be using moving forward. After that tedious process was over, I had to reconfigure all 166 buttons that we previously configured. This was necessary because the progression script in our new Tycoon system works differently from the old one. Since you guys already seen me do this before, I'll skip the timelapse this time.
12 seconds later.
And after a long 30 minutes, our new progression script is finally ready. Now, it was time for our first playtest. Right away I noticed few errors in the output. Luckily, these were simple to fix, just a few improper configurations that we missed. All we had to do was adjust them to make sure everything was fully compatible with our new models, and that was it. Let's test it again. So far, so good. The player can now purchase buttons with the new Tycoon system. Let's fix up the bank so the player can collect cash, and we want the player to spawn in the game with 0 cash so we can probably test if our original error was fixed. And there it is. The player now spawns with no money, and when they don't have enough cash to buy the next button, they're correctly prompted with the Robux store just like we wanted. Once we fixed up the bank system so the players could collect cash, we moved on to adding the rebirth system. And let's just say that didn't go as smoothly as planned, but you'll see why later in the video. To add a rebirth system we had to take scripts from old and unreliable sources, which was pretty ironic considering I had just replaced the entire Tycoon system specifically to avoid using outdated scripts, but oh well. We swapped out the old Tycoon shop button for our new rebirth button and imported the necessary scripts from old place into our new setup. Of course, we made sure to delete any scripts we no longer needed and carefully integrated the old ones to get the rebirth system working. Once that was done, it was time for a playtest. At first it looked like we had done it, everything seemed to be working, until I realized that the rebirth multiplier wasn't functioning. Instead of fixing it right away, I decided to just ignore the issue and move forward, which as you'll see later in the video definitely came back to bite me. After successfully ignoring the main purpose of the rebirth system, I shifted my focus to making the rebirth frame look nice and polished to match the rest of the UI. I did this by adjusting the UI corner, stroke and gradient to match the style of all of our other frames. Then I added a proper title, changed the font to make it more consistent, and finally I quickly grabbed a rebirth icon from Photoshop and bam! Our new rebirth frame was as pretty as can be. After a lot of brainstorming, I decided to change the layout of our map, switching from cross layout to a setup where players are next to each other. This change is meant to enhance the competitive aspect of the game, making it feel more intense and interactive. On top of that, I had sudden realization. I actually wanted to keep our car system. Originally I considered removing it, but it turns out it's super useful, especially when players have purchased hundreds of buttons. Now, let me explain. Each rainbow part is 8 stars wide, and with 160 parts at the time, that added over 1300 stars of walking space. Running back and forth across that distance will be boring and inefficient, but having cars solves that problem. Plus, keeping the car system allows us to retain all of the monetization features related to cars, like starter pack and car pack, so it's a win-win. And lastly, I had one more idea. I decided to add leaderboards to the game. This way players can compete on a global level and not just within their server. Right, cue in the time lapse. Wait, I just realized something. I rebuilt the entire game to use a reliable Tycoon system only to add an unreliable old feature back into it. How could I be so Well, you win some, you lose some, but this won't stop us from finish the game. Even though I initially ignored the problem with the rebirth system, I've decided to fully commit to making a reliable game. So instead of trying to fix a broken system, we are removing the rebirth system altogether and shifting our focus to infinite progression. Here's the plan. Instead of rebirths, we'll keep adding more and more rainbow parts with every update, making it almost impossible to ever fully complete the game. This opens the door for longer grinding sessions from players, keeping them engaged for much longer. With rebirth system, not a lot of players will want to replay the same game over and over, but with the unlimited amount of buttons to unlock, players will be intrigued to see if the game is even beatable. And for those rare few who actually manage to complete the game, we'll reward them with an exclusive badge, a symbol of just how difficult and rare it is to achieve 100% completion in the game. Now it's time to delete all of the hard work we did with the unreliable rebirth system. So let's speed it up. First, I removed the top rebirths leaderboard since we won't be using it anymore, but we are keeping the top playtime and top cash leaderboards, so let's make them look nice and polished, just like this. Next, I deleted all the rebirth UI elements. Since we now only have one button in the first row instead of two, this gives us a great opportunity. We can make the Robux store button bigger, making it stand out more. Hopefully this will improve our monetization in the long run. And finally, it's time for some extensive testing. As always, few errors popped up, but they were simple fixes, just a matter of re-adding scripts that actually work. And this is it. Our Rainbow Tycoon is now fully playable and it's ready to be monetized and marketed.